Yeah, I'm just gonna make another video right off the bat. This is what I think art is and why we shouldn't pursue to be better at art, but instead pursue to make art in a way that is better. And I'm still thinking about it. My opinion might change throughout the conversation here, but well, explanation, I should say. But first, I want to define art. What is art? You first need to know what I mean when I refer to art, right? And why I think it should be this or why it should be that. Art on a fundamental basis is the expression of a person in a way that can be best understood by an audience. That's what it is fundamentally. And I use that as my definition because it's broad enough where anything human related can figure out can be put into this category. Like you're going to grab groceries and the other person can understand that and understand how you feel. In a way, those groceries and the purchase of those groceries is art. In a way, human interaction is art. In a way, you could argue it, I think, and maybe that is a very broad definition of art. But if art is something that connects with a person, then I think that is fair. I think that is a fair definition of art, given the bajillion different ones you could use. Like, there is never a clear definition for art, ever. Most artists don't even know what they consider art. I had once asked a music teacher what they think art is, and they said they basically dodged my question and said it was subjective. But looking back on that, there's some truth to that because expression is subjective. What one person sees is ultimately not what another will. But generally, you could argue the goal here is now to more or less make art connecting to others, right? That's what it means. But what does it mean to connect to others? How can you do that through a piece of paper with funny lines on it? Or through nonsensical sounds that we interpret? How can we do that? How does that work? What makes that art? And ultimately, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What makes one piece of art good and the other bad? And if there's no such thing as bad art, then what even is good art? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Um, I think generally, if you're trying to express something to a certain group of people in a way that will make them feel something meaningful, you first need to ask who are you trying to work this towards, right? That's the first thing you gotta know. And that is a very hard question to answer because most people don't even know that. Like, who are you trying to express your art towards? And if it's no one, then can you really say you're an artist? Doesn't that kind of break some sort of rule, right? Some imaginary rule? And although I do think there's a fair point in that, I also think that art doesn't necessarily need to be expressed to any audience. It can be expressed to yourself. You can be the creator and the audience of your own art. And if that's the case, what standards do you even hold for that? Because you will always understand yourself. You'll understand how you feel when you make something. You'll understand what it means to you as well. But what if you aren't actually trying to do anything like that? What if you simply enjoy a form of art, like drawing occasionally or creating music occasionally? Then are you still an artist? I think most people would say no. And I think that's because art is something that has to have some sort of specific meaning to it, usually, right? What we associate with art is generally something meaningful and emotionally like emotionally impactful. But if you just enjoy drawing, then it's neither. Oh, this guy, dude. Um, yeah. So then what? First, I'm gonna go back to the original question. What makes good or bad art? Nothing. If it's just a judgment of an audience and the audience is simply whoever you want it to be, then there's nothing concrete making art good or bad. It's just how you feel, what its meaning is to you, and what you think of it. And those are all subjective by nature. Even in an audience that generally agrees in this of the same things, you will see slightly different versions of that. So then, what makes a good artist is not necessarily if they connect with their audience, but if their audience connects with the art. And by that point, it doesn't really matter. And what I mean by if the person connects with the art is that generally speaking, when you express yourself to someone and they understand that, they can reciprocate that, that isn't what we would usually call just trying to figure out this position. I think I screwed up somewhere. Oh, I can't castle. That's great. You guys, just an amazing person. I'll just do that. But yeah, I think the person connecting with the art and the art connecting with the person are different things because a person connecting with the art, that could happen to anybody. Anybody can connect with art if they feel it's right. Oh, they just gave up the queen. Nice. Um, I think that makes it so that ultimately you making the art isn't the reason they're connecting to it. It's them personally. That's why they're connecting to it. The intention you put to that art is just a reflection of themselves. They connected with the art. You didn't create any connection with them. And it's still a connection you have. It's just not one you can say you made. If somebody feels something for the art you've created, that's not necessarily the same thing as you making a connection because of your art with the other person. That just doesn't happen because an artist's intent in a work comes off differently depending on the audience, right? And if that's the case, then it's not the art connecting with the person. I mean, yeah, it's not the art connecting with the person, it's the person connecting with the art. And that is not something you can really concretely put down in any audience, I'd argue. Like, that is not up to you. Your art does not do that on its own. And I think you could argue you could do some certain things to get people to like your art more, dislike your art more, but ultimately that doesn't really matter because it's not your art that makes them like you, like the art itself. It's a reflection of themselves onto that art that makes them enjoy that art. Like, it's subjective. And ultimately, that takes away from any major reason to say art is good or bad. It is an expression of the self only understood by the self. And can be recognized by others and understood by others. So I take back my past statement. But that understanding is only because the other person feels something to that art. Not because what you did pushed out onto them, because they pushed on to your art. To give an example, imagine you make poetry, right? And you pour your heart into this poetry, right? And you want people to connect with it and understand how you feel through it So you make a really sad piece of poetry. That poetry pops off. Everybody enjoys it. It's the best thing in the world. Everybody values it as good art. It's sophisticated. It best expresses your opinions and your feelings onto others, which is what art is. It creates a connection. But 2 years later, people dislike it. Why? Well, it's because the person or your audience has now grown distance from it. It now sees it as an old thing. And a new type of poetry has come out that connects better somehow with others, despite many others saying that yours was the best. Actually, it's not for some reason, because a new thing came on and did it better. Why? No real specific reason. No real specific reason at all. So then why did they connect with your poetry in the first place? Not because your poetry expressed fully what you wanted onto there, although I guarantee at least some people recognized what you wanted, at least to some degree. But the reason your poetry popped off and was considered good is because other people connected to the art. Not the art connecting to the people, but the other people that were feeling sad or not great that day or just wanted to read something sad. They saw that piece of work and said, wow, this is exactly how I feel. Or other people misinterpreted it differently and thought, wow, this is really corny. That's why it's so good. It's funny. So then, what this means is that not your art that is good. It simply was enough for other people to recognize it. Through sheer luck, it got popular. Like everything else in this world, sheer luck made it popular. And you and your art are no longer as celebrated as it once was. Because ultimately your audience changed. And now your art is not great. And does that mean your expression has changed? Does it mean it can no longer connect with people on the same way? No, your art hasn't done anything wrong. Your art is still great. But everybody else doesn't see it that way, therefore it is no longer great. Do you see the issue? It's completely subjective. That's the worst part about art. It doesn't form a connection with the person forms a connection with the art, and because that could be, in its own way at least, slightly different from what you intended, nobody is going to fully get a connection from the art, but instead have a connection with the art, if that makes sense. Like, you feel something for the art, but the art doesn't actually make you feel something. It's just you finding that feeling and seeing it on another thing until eventually you change and that thing no longer does that for you. It's not concrete. It's not logical, I would argue, to value art on a solely good or bad basis because of that subjectivity on emotion. Because now art is always changing, therefore it doesn't really exist in an objective sense, at least. So then how can we make good art? Because clearly expressing yourself, that changes over time. That is not art. Art is not the expression of yourself to another person in a long-lasting way, because that person will change. And because of that, your art will no longer be an expression. So then how do you manage that? How do you redefine art and see artwork as something else? I'll put on a game review for you to be entertained in the background. But how can you change that now? I think it's through understanding art is an expression of the self for the self. If you can make something meaningful to you, something you think is good and something you care about because either it looks good or it means a lot to you and you just care for the process. I'm the latter. I think if the process is well done, it doesn't even really matter that much how it looks like. How it looks like is more of a bonus. That's what I think art is. And because of that, good art is simply whatever you think is suitable for yourself, because it's the only real artwork you'll understand the intention of fully. Because ultimately, in order to know art, you need to know the artist on a personal level, and that's just not possible. I don't think you could know everything about anybody in your life downright to the exact emotion they're feeling. You might have an idea, but it's not the same thing. So now what do we do? Well, how do we make good art? Because under my definition of art, it's simply having a process that you enjoy and a process that is beneficial to you, and having an outcome that is good is generally just a bonus. Having an outcome people can understand is generally a bonus, because that will fade. That is not because of you, but because of them. So that becomes a bonus. Other people understanding your art becomes a bonus, is what I'm trying to say. You understanding your art becomes the achievement of art. And that is fairly easy to do. You can do that anytime you want. Right? So then what's the point of the making art then? It's the process then. To get better at the process towards what you would want it to be. And although that is not guaranteed, nothing in this life will be. So you might as well try to do better for its own sake in art. Because the outcome and how it looks, although is arguably important to a degree, it does satisfy a person to see aesthetically pleasing art. That is just genuinely, I think, a fact. If it is aesthetically pleasing, you will enjoy it more, for better or worse. But instead of trying to ignore or change that, I think it is a good thing in art to enjoy the aesthetics of something. And to not enjoy something in their aesthetics too, that matters too. That's a good thing as well. Because you can enjoy the process between art and say it is good art because you care enough to make it and you understand it properly, because that's ultimately what good art is. But what makes better art is simply how it looks to you and how that feels. All right, yeah, to summarize, art is the expression of the self, primarily to the self, with other people understanding being more of a secondary bonus, like a secondary cause, or another definition or part of artwork. Because let's be honest, artwork has changed over the past hundreds of years, right? What was beautiful 100 years ago could be considered less beautiful than something today, right? Photography, you could say, right? Photography has changed, it's gotten better over 100 years, I'd hope, right? Black and white photos are no longer really the most beautiful things. It's what you see on Instagram, it's what you see from traveling, trips, and stuff like that. That's what's beautiful. Because it shows something you enjoy in a photograph in a way that you can understand and makes you feel good. But that's not because the photo got worse, because the black and white photo is not good photography. But because simply this other photographer, this other photo is simply more connecting to you now because you're connecting to it, not because it's connecting to you. And that's ultimately it. Yeah. Um Art is the expression of the self to yourself and to others, but that part is less important. You could say is the summary. of this entire video. I feel like I've missed over a few things. I feel like you could redefine what I've said. If you have any criticism, feel free to let me know. I do want to learn and get better, even if it is hard. I do want to have a better definition of artwork. Because if you can't enjoy making art or enjoy, frankly, the beauty of yourself and how sometimes others can connect to what you've done, I think you should try again. Because I think to a certain degree, we're all artists. We're all people who can connect with others, connect with ourselves the most, and do what we think is good. I mean, that's why I'm having this YouTube video made in the first place. I want to figure out a good definition for art. Because clearly expressing how you feel as others, that changes, and that's not a solid definition because it changes heavily over time. How could one thing be beautiful today and be horrible tomorrow? I just don't see that as reasonable art, a reasonable definition of art. Game rating of 1050 with the elo of 328. Let's go. Uh, yeah. I'm trying to think of something because I know I'm missing something. I think a solid criticism of what I'm saying is that you could simply say art is always changing, and good art is simply what connects with others. And what I'm trying to do is not art. What I'm trying to define is not art, but instead some sort of reflection of the self, which you could argue that's what art is too, a reflection of the self. But that I am self-centering it to only you who can truly understand it. That part comes down to opinion. If you think others can truly understand you perfectly, I think that's impossible, which is why I'm going with this definition of art. But yeah, that's all I got to say. Um, Feel free to say anything in the comments after that. Kindly, please. Please. Um, have a good night.